Hey all, it's Mike Yao, or GM Mikey, again with Savage Kingdoms role-playing game and Fire in the Head Productions. Thought I would do another video. I'm nice and fresh from vacation. I feel pretty good and loose, and I need to finish up this game mastering series. So, like my Gryffindor hat. Hint, where I've been, right? Wizarding World of Harry Potter and all that stuff. Right, down at Universal Studios, very fun. The wife and I had a good time, so we are back, and this is part 2 of Game Mastering Savage Kingdoms. I did the part 1 last week, I believe. It's been 7 or 8 days ago, something like that. It's had some views, kind of the usual thing. So just to get this out of the way really quick, like and subscribe and share and, I don't know, talk about the channel a little bit. Trying to get this thing built up. Wanting to share more about my knowledge about not only acting, but certainly game design and game mastering, which is what I usually speak on. Yeah, I've been at this for almost embarrassing over 40 years. So I've got a little bit of insight to share. Excuse me, as I cough randomly. So today is part 2 of Game Mastering Savage Kingdoms. The first video from a week ago had about 5 points. Not about, actually had 5 points broken down, and then I had like sub points in each one of those 5 categories. And this one will also have 5 categories with like some A, B, and C stuff under each one of them. That'll be about it, right? Okay, so now that I've just discussed the format of the video, let's go ahead and do it, shall we, and get right to it. Okay, Game Mastering Savage Kingdoms Part 2. Number 1, spells, magic, and mysticism. So, as a game master, and again, I'm speaking mostly game mastering Savage Kingdoms in particular, but a lot of this stuff will actually fit with any kind of game mastering, whether it's Dungeons and Dragons, whether it's Pathfinder, Numenera, Dungeon Crawl Classics, whatever. Yeah, pretty much any tabletop role-playing game. So, but this video is more specifically geared towards my game Savage Kingdoms. Okay, number 1, spells, magic, and mysticism. First, let's go over the mechanics of these things, all right? Because I have a little sort of outline I'm following, believe it or not. Mechanics, game mechanics. So what are the game mechanics of such things? So magical arts is the skill that will govern most magical use, magical lore within Savage Kingdoms. It's broken down into 7 disciplines, as they're commonly known as, or types. Air, earth, water, fire, shadow, life, and death magic. So those are your 7 types. So they are skill roll, just like anything else. And if you're attacking with a weapon, you would make a weapon melee weaponry roll. If you were attacking with a ranged weapon, you would make a ranged weaponry roll. Very intuitive. If you were trying to hide or sneak, you would make a stealth skill roll, right? So magical arts is no different. You would make, say for example, you wanted to cast say you knew the Conjure Flame spell. Pretty simple flame spell or flame, because it will be summoning a simple flame if it works. It's difficulty level 10 and 15. The reason there's the 2 different numbers in these, if you look at the spell description, it's because the easy version of it, DL10, difficulty level 10, that means you only have to get a 10 or better on the die roll after all your bonuses are added, if you have any. And that means you do the simple version of the spell, which is you make a candle light up in the area, or a torch instantly bursts into flame, or pretty much any semi-combustible or combustible object within 10 yards. The higher version, difficulty level 15, or DL15, mean you can light up a weapon in your hands and attack with like a flaming weapon, which is really cool. That's a little more difficult, hence the higher difficulty level. The stamina cost for the easy one, the DL10 one, is 1, and the stamina cost for the DL15 version is 2. So every time you cast a spell, there is a stamina cost, as you probably already know. That's stamina represents in Savage Kingdoms games not only your, as you would think, traditional stamina, but also as a slightly deeper cut, really your preserve of life energy that you can kind of tap into. So it's life energy kind of fuels magic in the Savage Kingdoms world for the most part. There are some other talents that add to that make the source of magic come from somewhere else, or the way you manipulate magic come from somewhere else. But as the base way of doing it, it comes really from in. It takes energy and stamina to produce these mystical effects that are supposed to be quite rare and interesting and wondrous, not common actually. So that's how you do that. There's the game mechanics. So like any other skill, if you score 20 above what you need, say the difficulty level was 10, for example, and you got a 30 somehow, probably from a exploding 20, you got a natural 20, you get to roll again, as it happens in Savage Kingdoms. If you're really good at something, you may not even have to have scored a natural 20. You might get 20 above just from a regular, like a base roll of, say, 18 or something. In any case, critical success. Each spell description has a listing of potential critical successes that the game master can either choose or roll randomly. I prefer to roll randomly, actually. You can also have your players choose, but that kind of slows the game down, in my opinion, so be careful of that, unless they happen to have the page open to that spell or have a copy of it or something. Critical failure still occurs like any other skill. If you get a natural 1 and the final result is 10 or more less than what you need. For example, say it was difficulty level 20 you were trying to do with the spell, and you only managed an 8 after getting a natural 1. So say you had a +7 bonus, right? So 1 plus 7 is 8. Just an example. You would have critically failed because not only did you get a natural 1, but the final result was 10 or more over what you, or less than what you needed. So there's a little paragraph in each spell description too about critical failures, and you would roll randomly on that. So I highly recommend that be the case, so that you're not picking and choosing and showing any favoritism or what might be presumed as favoritism. And as you can imagine, there's some pretty bad effects for magic is pretty serious. I honestly kind of wished I would have made it even a little deeper and darker. I probably kind of like lightened it a little bit, but it's still there. You can get, with shadow magic, with mental spells, you can get some serious headaches. You can be stunned for a few moments. You can, manipulating fire magic, you can actually burn your hands or ignite an object on your person if you critically fail. So kind of fun, but also kind of dark, and it kind of tells a story that magic, which is often referred to as sorcery in the setting, can be pretty serious, and that only just a few people really try to even deal anything with it. It's just it is often too much trouble, too much darkness involved. So be conscious of the critical successes and critical failures and that sort of thing. Right. All right. The next little point in the number one spells, magic, and mysticism heading is rituals, and then I put mystics for some reason. Oh, mysticism. So rituals. Remember that as a game master, that the average NPC works magic through rituals. So as you may know, in the Savage Kingdom setting, you can cast pretty much any spell you know, technically, any spell that you know, as a ritual, which takes an hour. And it gives you a +2 bonus to the die roll, a +3 bonus if you happen to have one of the really rare ritual components that's listed in each spell. There might be even another, you might even have some other item or a familiar that gives you yet another bonus for. So if you really pay attention, you can kind of rack up those bonuses by using ritual magic. But a lot of player characters as adventurers and mercenary types use a lot of battle magic, what I call battle magic in the game, and that's just your the spell that it just takes an action to cast, or some spells take 2 actions. But in any case, very quick, right? They're spoken really quick, requiring tons of focus, which is why the stamina cost for that version, the really short version of a spell, is exactly the same as a ritual, because it does take all this sheer thought and energy in this one moment. So that's the fluff reason why. The game mechanic reason why is it's just easier to keep track of that way. So yeah, so remember that most NPCs, non-player characters in the setting, are probably using ritual magic because they're not often involved in these skirmishes and battles and strange explorations of places. So I'd say 80–90% of the time they're using ritual magic, particularly priests and say in temples, because the temple is generally already a sanctified place, so they feel safe casting, working magic within the temple itself. Some of them are actually sanctums, so if you have the sanctum magic talent, then you get bonuses for that as well on top of that. So something to keep in mind as a game master. The last little thing about point number one, which is spells, magic, and mysticism, is mysticism itself. So remember, as a game master, that magic is it should be, in my opinion, very mysterious. If you look up Webster's definition of magic, it even pretty much spells that out. I think there's several different uh, entries, but I think the first one, the way it used to be a long time ago, maybe different now. It said, I think magic was something, and I'm paraphrasing, um, an event that occurs that's something rare and wondrous. And I think us tabletop gamers need to take that to heart more often. There's a lot of, and maybe because I'm not a huge fan of high magic in general, except for like Lord of the Rings, but even that to me is like grounded high fantasy. Um, that remember, it's if magic is common, then it's no longer rare, right? Which is one of the definitions of Webster, and then certainly no longer wondrous because it just happens all the time. Now, if it's a particular setting where that's a thing, like Eberron, that's great. But speaking of Savage Kingdoms, it's supposed to be a little more grounded. It's almost like quasi historical fantasy in a way, because a lot of the cultures are married to real world cultures to a degree. So just remember about to add all the mysticism involved as the game master when you're describing magical effects, and that it's not common at all, and it could be very dangerous. And so when you're populating the world with your NPCs, remember that maybe 1 out of 100 people, that's actually really high. I'd say probably 1 in 500 has any magical gifting, the magic, which would be the magic affinity talent. Somebody might have dabbling arcanist as a talent, which means they just know one spell. Just they randomly learned it. It's kind of cool how you could describe how you learned it. Like there was an old tome that you studied over and over for a couple of years, and you finally figured out how to work this one magical effect. Um, but as far as like fully developed several skill levels of a magical arts discipline, or even several, would be really rare. So and this also gives the benefit to the player characters. So now they're even more special. Remember, this game is about them being protagonists, the main characters, right? The leads, the principals. Um, so if they're the ones with 5 skill levels and a couple of magical arts, and that's amazing because that's extremely rare. It's like 1 in 10,000 people in the world would probably have that. So keep that in mind as a game master, right? Number two. Number two is elite affiliations. So elite affiliations are your secret and elite orders and organizations and sects within the Savage Kingdom setting. Elite affiliation actually is a talent. So if you take it, that gives you access. That means you're a member of one of these groups that are in the book. There's a whole chapter about it, just to show off the cool rule book again, really quick. It's all in right there. Um, there's, I think, 18 or 19 of them that were included in the core rulebook. There'll be some more in the Savage East when it comes out, hopefully in the next year or so, if not before. Um, so you can player characters and become members of these things. And the reason this is a thing I wanted to hit on in the video is that sometimes there's some confusion. So when you go to the chapter in the book, there's a couple paragraphs before you get into all the different sects and orders that are broken down, and just giving some basic information. The second paragraph in there does say what I'm about to say, but it's kind of hidden in the text, so some people don't see it. And what that is ranking up, so gaining rank. So a player character always starts at the lowest rank of an elite affiliation, whether it's being a priest of Androck or a priest of Agathon or a priestess of Lucia or priestess of Signa or whatever, or a member of the Shadow Hand or a Grey Knight of Cormac or a Knight of the Sword and the Rose or something like that. Any of those cool elite sort of organizations, the player characters always start at the lowest rank. The exception to that is having the adept talent. So there is a talent called adept, which means you start basically at the kind of adept rank. In other words, the second rank of that affiliation. So the player character can start already at that second rank instead of having to start at the first. So the reason this is confusing is because there's an age and or renown qualification for those ranks. So I've had some players go, "Hey, I'm age whatever, and I have this renown already, so apparently I'm the third rank in this order." Starting off, like, no, that's not the case. It's like, think about it in real life. Say if you're say if you've done some martial arts, maybe done some medieval reenactment, but suddenly you're wanting to take another martial art form. You probably still have to start at the white belt. Now there's a way you can get around that, I think, you're testing with various senseis or whatever, but you probably still have to start at the lower rank, even though you probably should be higher, right? So think of it like that. Ranking up can happen in play or as downtime. Ranking up meaning once you hit the qualifications for the next rank, that should be something special. Speaking as a game master, or to you as a game master, either have it in play, which is probably the coolest way to do it because it can be a special kind of moment, nice little scene for the character, for the player characters involved, and whereas a senior member of that order is providing usually a ceremony involved, or it could be just basic. There's some guidelines to most of the orders in there, like maybe what they would kind of do, but largely it's up to the game master. So most of the priests, particularly the mystery cults and mystery sects like Romega, they're probably going to be long involved ceremonies with lots of ritualism, which can be a lot of fun. Something like the Black Lions, the company of Black Lions, is probably going to be very basic. You're a captain now here. Right? Here's a nice shield with a lion painted on it, and here's a nice set of chainmail. Right, be off. It could be as simple as that. So let that happen either in play or in downtime. Downtime is usually at least a week. So this would fit right in a week. Maybe even would take 2 weeks. Another caveat to that is the player character may have to travel to an actual location to meet with a senior member of the order or the order's headquarters, be it a castle or a temple or something, to receive these benefits. But again, that could take place in downtime, or if you can weave it in as a game master into the overall narrative, the campaign, you can have that happen in play, and it can be, like I said, a very special moment. So don't forget about that. All right, point number three, gear and equipment. So there's a chapter dedicated for that in the core rulebook. The reason I want to bring it up in this video for game mastering is there's a couple things to not forget. So number one is cultural items. So every player character starts with a cultural item, possibly two if they spend a point of luck. And every human culture has it. Every non-human race has something cool that you can start with. Like I said, usually it's one, and like the book says, or as the book says, if they expend a luck point, they can start with a second item. These are normally items that you won't find on the open market. That's why they're not. There's some of them are. Most of them are not found in the equipment chapter and like the equipment charts and stuff. You can't just like walk in any town and buy one. Generally speaking, there's a few that are, but they usually have like a caveat attached to it. You'll see in the book or have seen. One might be like a captured rusty longsword from an enemy, which already gives you kind of a cool little background thing. And then in parentheses, it may say DL20 crafting roll to improve to exceptional quality, or to fix the damage and make it average quality. So it gives you a nice little story thing, but also kind of a game mechanic attached to it. Something similar is that there's a few cultures that have like you can get a scroll or a tome that has some obscure writing in it, and it's like a language skill roll, DL20 maybe, to decipher what it says. And you as the game master now get to come up with what that is. It could be a nice little plot hook. It could just be something as simple as a +1 miscellaneous bonus to lore skill rolls or something like that. So keep those in mind. Those are kind of fun. All right, point number two with the gear and equipment is the actual book stuff, the actual chapter that has the equipment chart or charts, because they're broken down into armor and weapons and transport and like miscellaneous goods and like animals and livestock and stuff like that. You'll see in the book. The reason I'm bringing this up is that the main thing to kind of remember is that each item or almost every item has like some little other notes, little characteristics. For example, for a cloak may give you +1 bonus to endurance rolls when resisting cold. Exceptional quality lockpicks give you, I think it's a +1 bonus on lockpicking. Maybe it's mastercrafted. But anyway, pay attention to some of those notes, because even what seems to be kind of mundane equipment or clothing or accoutrement might give you actually a little game mechanical bonus or keep you from having a penalty. For example, trying to pick a lock without a lockpick is actually anywhere from -2 to -5. penalty depending on what improvised tool is being used. So usually, if somebody's using a dagger tip or an arrow tip, usually I just imply a -2 penalty. If it's something like trying to pick a lock with a bone, it's -5 just because of the material. So having a lockpick really actually it doesn't necessarily give you bonuses; it just gets rid of those negatives. And there are a few other tools like that too. So kind of pay attention to that. Another little point about gear is you'll probably notice every item has C, U, R, or E. Cure. Unintentional next to it, and you'll see that if you go down to the asterisk, the abbreviation, what it means common, uncommon, rare, and exotic. And that tells you kind of the commonality or rarity of the object in question, or the item in question, or the service in question. So C is common. A lot of things are going to have a C. There's a lot of things with U, uncommon. There's a few things with rare, and just a few things with exotic. And the way that works, and it kind of touches on a little bit in the book, is that so say you're just in a village, you're 80% of the time you're going to find anything common. Uncommon is going to be Uncommon is going to be pretty rare, like 40%. I think it breaks down. Rare is going to be almost impossible, maybe 5%. Exotic is virtually impossible in a small village. You get to a large city or a metropolis, then you'll even be able to find exotic things most of the time. Probably, I think the percentage chance of like 10% or 20%. It's in the book there. And you can kind of play with that, of course, depending on what region you're in. If you're familiar with the setting, and hopefully you'll read the Gazetteer section because it gives you so much more insight about the setting, which I'll get to in a moment. It'll even break down like each kingdom and each kind of region or tribal territory has like exports and imports. So something with an export obviously means they have an abundance of, right? That's why they're exporting it. So if you go into a place known for exporting copper, that means chances are there are probably copper mines in the area, right? So anything made of copper is probably going to be common, even if it's in a tiny village. So yeah, just you can futz with little things like that, which would be kind of cool, and that might even be cheaper. Probably will be cheaper, like maybe 75% of the listed cost, 80%, something like that. So there's some fun wiggle room there as a game master slash storyteller. Um, right. Let's see. In exotic items, the only chance you really have to find those is really from anywhere from a large town up to a city or a metropolis. Maybe there's a 10% chance you find an item that has an E next to it, exotic, in say a small town, maybe. A tiny village, probably never. So, all right. Number 4, bookkeeping. This seems oddly shoehorned, but I thought it was a good time to talk about it. Number 4, I could have saved it to the end, but that's something else I think is fitting at the end. So, all right, number 4 is bookkeeping. And what does that mean precisely, Mike, when you say bookkeeping? Well, precisely more about so keeping bookkeeping, like keeping all the records of the campaign notes and NPCs people find and stuff. That's kind of obvious. I mean, as a game master, you might want to write down. There's a lot of like minor NPCs that people encounter in my games that I don't really write. They're just kind of set dressing. They're featured extras. Um, but a major NPC that you didn't know about that suddenly got kind of developed, and they keep the player characters keep visiting or whatever, then you may want to write them down, write some stats down for them, and the very least just some basic stuff or some personality traits. I try to choose with an NPC at least one. I give them a weakness because weaknesses to me are like some of the best stuff to role play. Um, so if a person is and sometimes I roll randomly, say if just oathbound comes up, it's like that shows a person that probably takes oaths very seriously. They're very loyal, perhaps. Being oathbound to whatever particularly it is might come into play in conversation. Who knows? Uh, Somebody who's tainted is real pretty serious. This is going to be a pretty dark character. He's going to be maybe not very trustworthy, a little seedy, perhaps. So giving them a weakness is kind of fun. Phobias are kind of fun to play. If somebody has a phobia of fire and the character brings in a torch, a lantern, or something, it's probably not going to be to that degree of fear of fire. Fear of fire really comes more from a visceral, like from a burning house that they experience in their life or something. But if it's a major phobia, then yeah, maybe even a torch or even a candle might set that person off. So yeah, maybe give an NPC, at least major NPCs, a weakness, perhaps even two of them if they're really well developed. So yeah. So bookkeeping wise, honestly, I let the players keep track of most everything because I trust them. I mean, 99% of players are trustworthy. They're in on it with you into the storytelling. They realize this is not a game that you try to win. It's a collective. Everybody wins if everybody's having fun and telling a good story. Never quite understood the whole winning Dungeons and Dragons or winning table. Like, I understand you want like a successful character that does cool things, but you don't win the game. It's not that traditional game. So, and I know enough videos have been said about that, so that's all I'll say about it. But so, the point being that if you're playing with mature players who are not trying to win, you can trust them to bookkeep. They'll have even like the down to the smallest copper or bronze coin that they have, because I usually don't track that. Now, some of that I'm pretty decent at tracking that kind of in my head space. I sort of know this character has that beautiful jewel they found recently, and I know that maybe roughly has 50 silver pieces worth of wealth or 5 gold, same thing. Um, but yeah, as far as all the minutiae, just let the players kind of keep track of that. However, the next whole point of bookkeeping is health and healing. So that you might want to keep more track of. The players, again, they'll be honest here for the most part, but you might want to keep it for you, because the reason why, when you get to half health in Savage Kingdoms, you're considered staggered, and that's a -2 penalty to all die rolls, your defense, and mobility. I always forget the mobility part myself. Um, so that actually has a game mechanical effect, as well as a descripting effect. So when somebody's that injured, that's pretty grievous wound at that point, or several wounds that have added up to be grievous. And so it's pretty noticeable that I think D&D 4th edition, as much as I didn't care much for that edition, but they introduced bloodied as a thing that happened at half, which I thought was kind of a cool thing. It's like that person's visibly bloodied and they're visibly wounded at this point. So just so bookkeeping wise, kind of keep track of that, because there is a game mechanical thing. When you get to 0 health, this is where it gets a little tricky. Um, 0 health, you're unconscious unless you succeed in an endurance DL 15 roll, and that's at 0. If you go to -1, it's DL 16, -2, DL 17. So you see how it works. It's base 15 plus 1 to the DL for every negative health that you're in. When you get to negative half your health, you're dead. And this is all pretty spelled out in the book, but I just want to go over it really quickly. So, because I've run into a couple of people that overcomplicate it, it's actually super simple. So if you look at the character sheet, you've got full health, you got half health. So full health is full health. You're basically you're good till you get to half, right? Half means you're staggered, but also half of this second number, half of that negative is death. So it's very simple. Alive, staggered, negative, that, dead. So in between is where it gets a little tricky. So if they succeed in the endurance roll while they're unconscious, or while they in the negatives, they actually remain conscious, but they're at -5. It's called severely wounded, I think, is a condition. -5 to all die rolls, mobility, stamina, and both defenses. That means you're, as you can tell, negative. That's pretty bad. You're in really bad shape. You're just clinging on. What I call the Boromir mode, like in the one of the books in the film where Boromir has the arrows in him, and he's still alive, but he's not able to do much. He's able to do this lovely soliloquy and moment with Aragorn, but that's about it. So that's the Boromir moment, as I call it. I mean, by all rights, he probably should be dead, but he's a tough guy, and he's committed to this mission. So if you fail that roll, you bleed out 1 point per round. That's per round every 6 seconds until somebody can stabilize you with healing arts, which takes 2 actions to stop someone's bleeding. So no try there. Once you hit that negative of the second number, again, very simple, you're dead. So there used to be in old editions, because this has come up before, where you could spend 2 luck points if you had 2 luck to avoid death. But I actually got rid of that kind of last minute, and the reason why is and this all hinges on playtesting for the most part, is that's already kind of built in. So you can spend a point to take 5 less points of damage. There's all the ways. So having the old rule where 2 luck could just make you avoid death was a little too ambiguous and also not particularly gritty. And also a little redundant because you already had a chance to spend a luck to take 5 less points of damage. So yeah, so that's why it's not in the book anymore. If you want to add it up as add it back in as an optional rule as a game master, then feel free to do it. But just know that I did remove it, like officially for a reason. So all right, bookkeeping stamina. Stamina is similar to health in the fact that when you get to half stamina, again, there's 2 numbers on the character sheet. When you get to half stamina, you are considered fatigued. Fatigue means it's the same penalties as staggered, -2 to die rolls, defense, and mobility. The 2 do not stack, though, and it actually says it in the conditions chapter of the book. They do not stack because they have the exact same effects. The only reason I call them different names is because of description reasons. So when I'm running a game and I say that person's staggered, the players now know that that's more of a physical thing that has to do with health. When I say that person looks fatigued, they now know it's more of a mental thing, even though that can also be a little bit physical too. But it's mostly a mental, spiritual thing, stamina. So that's about that. When you get to 0 stamina, I actually forgot what. Oh yeah, it's also -5, just like severely wounded. It's exhausted. Exhausted is the condition, the actual name of it. But it's also -5 to all die rolls and defense and mobility. I don't think it's to your health though. So pretty severely tired, to put it straight. While I'm at the point of stamina, so you recover 1 point of stamina per hour. But this is the reason I'm bringing this up. This is dedicated rest. There's no I'm whittling a piece of wood for an hour. It's like no, that you're still using muscle. You're not committed to resting. So just sitting around in a tavern, that's probably resting. Drinking, meditating certainly would be. Just napping obviously would be, especially a Chennari. The Chennari like to, they sleep 10 hours a day at the very least. Yeah, so dedicated. So think about it. What's the primary purpose of what the character's doing? That's, I've allowed it happen with characters in the past who were riding in a wagon, um, but only if it was on a nice road. She was trying to recover she was a sorceress, stamina on a wagon, just kind of riding in the back. And as long as that was her primary thing, was resting or meditating, then I kind of allowed it. But once the wagon went on a rocky trail, or they were running fast from something, or so, obviously there was no rest at that moment. So just kind of, use your best judgment as game master. A full night's rest obviously gets all your stamina back regardless. So if you were down 12 stamina and you slept a full 8 hours or thereabouts, then it's all back. Wouldn't necessarily just be 1 per hour. It's not just 8 stamina back, 1 per hour. In this case, full night's sleep. All your stamina is back regardless. Okay, last bit of bookkeeping. Ammunition. This is a little bit of minutiae, but since I did support it in the game mechanics somewhat, thought I would go over it. So ammunition is like crossbow bolts, arrows, might even be if several people have several daggers, or even a couple javelins or whatever. Any kind of thrown or propelled object is technically ammunition. So there is a rule in the game, and the reason it's in bookkeeping is that again, I let my players kind of bookkeep all of that stuff. They're 99% like spot on, and probably more accurate than me anyway most of the time. But the thing you may have to do as a game master is you roll a d20 whenever they fire an arrow or a bolt or something. It's called a recovery chance. So an average quality arrow is recovered on 11 or higher on a d20. In other words, 50% of the time. Exceptional quality bolt is recovered on an 8 or higher, I believe, and a Mastercraft is recovered on a 5 or higher because it's just better made. So the recovery chance actually represents both finding the bolt. I used to actually make people roll perception for it, but then I'd have to do another roll to see if it survived. And I thought the quickest way to do that is just make it a quick recovery chance, and then the game master can describe however he wants to. You don't find it at all if it doesn't make the roll, or you can say the fletchings are torn and you have to repair it, or buy another one, or the shaft is broken. Especially if you roll low. If I roll a 1 on the recovery, then the object's completely broken. The arrowhead came off and is lost or whatever. So just another little point about bookkeeping. All right, number 5, the last thing. World building. World building. I don't know why I said it that way. All right, world building is the icing on the cake here, number 5. So, what is world building, right? This is a term that gets thrown around a lot. It comes mostly from originally more from authors, world creators, even showrunners now on television. And it's now become kind of a thing with game masters and people who, because we are, in a sense, authors, right? Building our own worlds and such. Or expanding upon a world that, using a world, like if you're running Savage Kingdoms, the world is already kind of there, but you're not only inheriting the world, but you're kind of expounding upon it a little bit, right? You're putting your own spin on it to some degree. Uh, I've run some Middle Earth stuff in the past, and that's not my world at all. It's Tolkien, J.R. Professor Tolkien's, right? But I'm still adding my little respectful spin to it here and there, right? So how I kind of envision it. So that's world building. Another thing with world building is lore and information. This is what like point A of 5A. So as a game master, remember lore and information is very important to the characters, right? So even though the players may have access to the core rule book, maybe they read it a lot, maybe they don't at all. If they don't at all, the good thing about that is that you control all the lore. So any lore that they learn about is like kind of like cool because they haven't really read the book. Uh, Obviously, we hope they read some of those so they know something about the world. But so being the kind of master or controller of the lore and information of the world is kind of an important thing. Um, when people succeed at lore skill rolls, because players will roll it on kind of what seems like random stuff sometimes, but also very cool things. Like, do I know any lore about that type of tree over there? So that would be nature specialty of lore if they happen to have that. Or herbalism. You could actually make that an herbalism roll if it has to do with a plant instead of lore. Or give them the option, which is what I would do. So yeah, they might roll lore on religious dogma or the color of the priest's robes. What rank does that mean he is within the, so expect all kinds of different lore rolls. That's just a single skill. It covers a lot of things. I did that on purpose, but it does cover a lot of things. But specialties can break it down to forbidden lore, arcane lore, religion lore, history, heraldry, nobility, stuff like that. When you're giving out the lore description is the next thing I kind of wrote down there. Giving out the lore, yeah, be descriptive about it instead of being clinical about it. I try to do things like you recall in an ancient tale about this forest and how it became lack of green, just black, gnarled, twisted trees. And one particular tale talks about wraiths, these ghostly beings that have bound themselves within the essences of these dark trees, that on occasion they will strike and attack travelers who wander through the wrong path. So maybe I'm describing the Wraithwood Forest in Bolivia, or maybe it's somewhere else. So yeah, you can be, you don't always have to do it cheesy like that, but instead of just giving a clinical answer, give them maybe you heard it in a tale, you read it somewhere. Um, your uh, your order trained you in this particular lore, especially if they roll high. So yeah, and the higher the roll in general, the more they know. So all right, last little bit of world building thing. I would say read the Gazetteer section. I'm very proud of it in the book. I don't think it's read enough. I think people skip over a lot, which I guess I don't really blame them. But there's so much like stuff in there that's really cool. If you want to know about if you're playing an Eridorian, go to the Eridorn section of Gazetteer, and it gives you the like common sayings that a lot of them use, like the exports and imports of that kingdom. It gives you the name of the coins that are used, some spots of history, some important characters of the era, some important NPCs. So yeah, don't overlook that. Is make sure you read some of that as a game master. If not, study it deeply. At least kind of skim it pretty good and kind of get a feel for these different cultures and geographical regions and such. So, all right. I think I'm going to end right there. We're actually less than 40 minutes, which is actually not bad, all things considered. So thanks for playing along. Hopefully you made it this far. Make sure you subscribe, share, all that YouTubey stuff, and trying to build a channel. So thanks for helping me out, and I will talk to you guys again soon.